Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com, as well as the mobile app. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Multiple ways you can interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You can hit us up on social media, hashtag Giants Chat. Directly interact with us. I'm at Lance Medow, one word, last name, Medow. He is at Giants WFAN. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So the heart of NFL free agency continues to move forward. There actually is a new report pertaining to the Giants. So, Paul, let's start there, and then obviously we can elaborate on some other topics. So the Giants just tweeted out within the hour, and this, once again, is according to multiple reports. It is only an agreement to terms. It's not an official signing yet because it is pending a physical, but they are adding outside linebacker Victor Dumikeji from the Arizona Cardinals, as he was another 2021 draft pick. This has been a big theme over the course of this offseason. He was the 210th overall pick, a sixth rounder. So he's been with the Cardinals throughout the duration of his rookie deal from 2021 to 2024. Mainly, Paul, a special teamer. If you look at his snap count, 2 years ago, he played more defensive snaps than we had seen, in the mid-30s, and he had a breakout campaign with 4 sacks. But if you look at the definition of his career thus far, mainly a special teams player, I think he falls under the umbrella of maybe there's potential there on defense, depending, of course, on playing time, but another valuable player that could very well contribute in terms of the special teams game.
Strong side outside linebacker / edge rusher. To me, he kind of replaces maybe the deep depth chart role that Boogie Basham had, who is now gone. I can't remember where he went to. Was it Baltimore?
Let me look up
Carolina?
to confirm, yeah.
I know he went somewhere else. He did sign a deal with someone a month or so ago. So that to me is the kind of the spot that he fills.
Carolina Panthers.
It was Carolina.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not necessarily seeing a great impact with this particular addition.
But once again, you need core special teams players.
Well, you do. And, you know, I talked to somebody last off season, and as we were going into the training camp, and I made this point on the show many, many times last year. I believe it was like 5 of the Giants' top 6 special teams gurus were gone from the previous year. And I remember saying, folks, one of the questions this team has to answer, because we know that, you know, special teams is a big part of the game. Who are going to be the key special teams guys? Who's going to make up that core 4 or 5 guys who on special teams, you know, can help change field position? They can help make a play for you. Because Lord knows, the Giants are not good enough that they can continue to climb uphill every time they get the ball. Nor are they good enough. Okay, the defense, while we think it's improved, it's also not to the point where they're going to be able to shut people down, you know, if they're getting the ball near midfield. It just doesn't work that way. When the field is tilted, it has a big impact on both your offense and your defense. So I was very concerned going into last season that the Giants did not have enough of real good special teams guys who could make up the fist of that unit. They never really did find those guys. A couple of guys did okay. You know, Bryce Ford Wheaton turned out to be pretty good.
Sure.
They wound up releasing Nick McLeod. But after that, I mean, honestly, Lance, after Bryce Ford Wheaton, who do you think was the next best special teams guy on the Giants?
Well, I mean, it's a tough question also because of the injury toll that
came
across the
doubt.
team. I would argue that they probably planned on utilizing guys very differently.
Well, I'm sure
prior
they did.
to the injury bug.
But the fact remains, it was not a very strong unit.
I would say Smith-Marset is another guy that I would throw out.
Well, on returns.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I include that.
I'm talking about coverage.
No, you're talking about coverage. Well, that to me is a little bit more challenging.
A lot of guys can give the return game a try, and you can always find somebody. But in terms of coverage,
but he ran with it and emerged.
And
though,
I like
fairness.
it. And he's re-signed, by the way.
Yeah.
So that's great. But, the better Giants teams that we've seen here over the last few decades usually had 4 or 5 guys on special teams who you thought could get down there and make a play for you. There was always that one ace or really 2 really good guys. But then there was another 3 or 4 guys that were pretty good. For years, Zach Diassi was terrific.
Well, what about Dwayne Harris?
Dominic Hickson.
4 core member. Yeah.
Absolutely. Michael Thomas.
Another guy. Yep.
These guys were terrific. And the Giants, as part of their issue, and we didn't talk about this enough last season, nor have we talked about it enough this offseason, the Giants needed to find another core group of good special teams players so that they can go into any game saying, you know what, we've got a good chance to at least win special teams. Let's win at least that third of the game. And we'll worry about the rest of it, but let's make sure we at least get that third of the game. Too many times last year, they were giving away that third of the game. So I don't want to belittle the fact that they have added several special teams guys over the course of the last month. That does mean something to me. And I'm going to be looking forward to training camp trying to find out who these lead guys are going to be.
Yeah, they're not sexy signings. I mean, let's call it what it is. But the problem is, and this is why I don't get so caught up in names in free agency, when the season comes about and you get into the nuts and bolts that you're talking about, the weeds, as you like to call it, Paul, on special teams, these guys matter, especially if they do make the roster. So you're looking at Chris Board, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, and now the linebacker they just added from the Arizona Cardinals. Okay, that's 3 players that have special teams primarily on their resume that were added over the course of the last 2 weeks. So you could tell that is a priority. It's not just getting young guys who are scratching the surface of potential in their 2021 draft class, but it's also players that may do the little things that could very well add up. And what you were hammering home is the fact that, especially last season, it came to the forefront. The Giants were not talented enough, consistent enough on offense and defense to have special teams mishaps. There are teams in this league, Paul, they can have a special teams missed tackle. They give up a special teams touchdown because their offense or defense is so prolific, it doesn't matter in the long run. The Giants did not fall in that category. So if you don't fall in that category, the margin for error is, forget minute, it's non-existent on special teams for the Giants. And until we see football this season come to life for the team, they're not in position to take anything for granted. So that's more of a reason why I don't think it's surprising at all that they're finding some good value signings or guys that they envision who they know they would be primary special teams players if they make the roster, but at the same time, and this is what you also have to weigh in free agency, in the event, Paul, that they were to lose a safety or they lose a linebacker, do they have confidence that this player can be plugged in and get, I'm not saying a high volume of snaps, but snaps sprinkled in here or there and be productive enough? Because that's something you also need to take into consideration. If I'm going to utilize one of my 53-man roster spots on a player who, once again, is known for special teams, I still need to envision the worst-case scenario.
Sure you do.
And the worst-case scenario, which came to fruition this past season, is the 2 or 3 players in front of these guys goes down, or maybe not necessarily the whole season, but misses a chunk, and now all of a sudden, a player that usually would log 20 to 25% of the snaps on offense or defense, respectively, now you're getting more into the mid to high 40s. That is a significant difference, Paul, in terms of the potential impact of what you're asking this player to do.
I'll just give you a quick list of the Giants' leading special teams coverage guys last season. Ty Summers was number 1. I don't think he's going to be on this team this year. Bryce Ford Wheaton was number 2.
Who we brought up.
We liked what he did last year. Dane Belton, number 3. Okay.
Yep.
Belton, fine. Casey Kreider.
Which you would assume, given the fact that he's the long snapper.
And yeah, I mean, that's a given.
Sure.
Matthew Adams has not been retained so far. He was also hurt for some of the year. And Summers was a latecomer anyway.
Yeah.
Isaiah Simmons, not been retained. Anthony Johnson, not been retained.
A lot of turnover.
Okay, so do you already see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
That's 2, 4, 6, top 7 guys on the special teams coverage units, and you've got Ford Wheaton, Belton, and Kreider, the only guys coming back. It makes a difference.
But also based on production, it's not surprising that there's a high turnover rate because they're looking at the film and they're saying, hey, we need to make changes. We need to bring in players that perhaps can showcase a little bit more consistency in terms of the fundamentals. So I don't think that, once again, that's a startling development, but it just goes to show you that they don't necessarily have a foundation on that facet of the football to say, hey, this is the definition of our group. That is evolving and that is changing. But, I don't want to dismiss, just like you don't want to dismiss the value of special teams, I also don't want to just overlook what the potential of some of these players could be if they have to play defensive snaps. Because it helps when you see, once again, he had 4 sacks 2 years ago. Okay, so that tells me that Dimukeji, when given some additional opportunities, has at least answered the call. You want to at least see that on film, Paul. You don't want to talk about potential.
No.
You want to feel as if there's tangible evidence. Same thing with Chris Board, who's been an active player during the course of his career with Baltimore. You at least feel as if, okay, it's not a given, it's not a guarantee, but there's something there on the bone that they could at least turn to.
Well, just think about 2 Giants linebackers who certainly made their mark on this team in recent years, Chase Blackburn and Jonathan Casillas, who started out their careers as special teams guys and then wound up becoming important parts of the defense.
Well, my favorite story about Chase Blackburn is when he's on the couch and the Giants, they bring him back mid-year. We've talked about this a lot. And then he comes back and he picks off Aaron Rodgers.
I know.
That is by far the definition of staying ready and you never know.
And Tom Brady in the Super Bowl.
Correct, yes. But to me, and I'm not downgrading, but it's more impressive the fact that he wasn't with the team.
It was 3 days, right? From the time he was on the sofa till the time he picked off
I want to say it
Rodgers.
Was something like that in
was
that
it 3
ballpark.
Days?
It probably, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'll take your word for it.
I'm pretty sure it was.
We can look it up. Yeah. All I know is he was signed the week of that game.
Yes.
I will tell you that.
Yes.
I don't remember the exact days, but I distinctly remember that. And the reason why also, if we're really being nitpicky, that I'm not necessarily putting the Brady interception. In fairness, Rob Gronkowski was not 100% in that game. Once again, not taking anything away from Chase, but it at least helped the fact that he was going up against a player that was coming into that game limping.
Gronkowski did not throw the ball.
I understand, but he was defending Gronkowski on the play. Don't you think that played a little bit of
Blackburn
a role?
Played the ball. He didn't play the man. He played the ball.
Well, but the man who had a chance to go after the ball with Blackburn was not fully healthy. I mean, at least meet me a little halfway. See, I know this is a lost cause. Pearson, why do I attempt to do this? Why am I a glutton for punishment on this program?
People who watch this show know that is one of the great plays in Super Bowl history.
And I said I'm not taking anything away. I'm just adding context to the conversation.
I understand.
Context is important. You're the first one to at least meet me with the context.
I do understand that.
Okay.
I do understand
That's
that.
all I ask.
Gronkowski was not 100%. Too bad.
Well, I'm not asking you to feel sorry for the Patriots. That's not the
played.
purpose of this conversation.
He played. You know what they say, right? All these players who go out on the field, they coach.
Okay.
I played the game. Don't cut me any slack.
No,
I played
agree.
the game.
I'm going to remember this.
He played. He played, and he didn't make the play. Blackburn did.
It is 12:47 p.m. Eastern on March 18th. The reason why I'm noting this, and Pearson, I want you to jot this down, is the next time we have a conversation and a Giants player was not 100% healthy, and you bring that up, I am going to
let me know.
Head back to the archives.
Let me know.
Of when we were talking about Chase Blackburn and Rob Gronkowski. That's the only reason why I wanted to highlight this.
I hope Chase still has that football. I don't know if he does, but I hope he still has it.
Well, I would hope that he made an effort, or somebody on the team, to give it to him.
I would suspect, but I really don't. I don't know if he actually has the ball.
Well,
anyway,
I'm looking up. I want to find out how many days it was so that we can get to the bottom of this. It's going to require maybe finding an article.
On a Thursday.
It was week 13 against the Green Bay Packers.
Right.
And I've got to find, one of those reports leading up. Well, let's see. This was 2012. Okay? No, this was the offseason, this article. So that was the following year.
I thought he came in on a
2011.
Thursday, and therefore Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then on Sunday he got him. That's how I recall it. Of course,
Okay.
he might have been here on Wednesday, but I kind of thought it was a Thursday.
Well, this article should be on point because this is an article on our very own website from back in 2011. So I don't think there's anything more reliable than
I
that.
could call Chase if you like, and
Well,
I'll just ask him.
I'm sure. Okay, 4 days.
It was Wednesday.
That was it.
Okay.
Yep, because look, the article starts off as many days as Chase Blackburn had to prepare for Sunday's game. Aaron Rodgers had thrown the same amount of interceptions all season long into MetLife Stadium.
So it was a
there
Wednesday instead of a Thursday.
It was 4. You were close.
I misremembered by one day. I'm
You know,
sorry.
Shame on you. This is
shame on me.
a tremendous criminal act here on this program, but somehow we're going to move forward. Yeah.
3 practices. Wednesday, Thursday,
So maybe
Friday.
that's what you were thinking.
At a walkthrough.
So we're trying to navigate
3
the facts
practices
here.
at a walkthrough.
3 practices, and for boy, you are really this is like Stretch Armstrong on this program today, too. Yes, but still, certainly that's why once again to bring this conversation full circle, I put that interception above everything else because he wasn't necessarily even thinking about putting on a Giants uniform back on again under those circumstances. But I think, once again, getting back to the theme that we're talking about is Blackburn and Jonathan Casillas, who I think are 2 great examples you were talking about, who came in as special teamers and then across their careers became more individualized defensive players that all of a sudden had to step up. And that is the lesson to be learned for all of these guys that the Giants are bringing in over the course of the offseason.
I think, the other thing, obviously, we're still dealing with this whole quarterback carousel.
Are we really? I noticed that during the reports. Okay. But go ahead, please. Yes.
And I just think that just to be upfront with everybody out there, we have heard nothing about a timetable, just like you have not heard one either. Nobody seems to have any idea as to when this thing will be finalized. Whoever it is one question. But the second question is obviously, well, when? And we have no answers to either one, just so you guys know.
Well, but here's the thing, from a big picture perspective, and our fans, our listeners know who the names are out there. We don't need to beat it like a dead horse. But the bottom line is, if the Giants have their heart set on one specific quarterback, as long as they're still out there, the level of urgency to me is not overwhelming because once the first domino falls, something tells me, Paul, the rest of these quarterbacks are probably going to fall into line.
I would think so. And quite frankly, I don't know after the Giants have been so busy. Is it up to 12 now, guys they signed?
Well, I have the list in front of me, so
it's
all about the numbers today. I didn't know this was going to be a mathematics equation.
The reason I say that
are we talking about additions, or are we including re-signing players?
Re-signings and additions. I think they're over a dozen now, right?
14, 15.
Okay, they've been so busy.
Yeah,
and to be frank, I don't think there's anything else to do. If I'm them, I'm probably just sitting tight. The quarterback thing is going to be the biggest chunk of money now that they're going to spend between now and July. So
now you got the draft coming up to address other voids.
I just don't think they're, the quarterback decision or the quarterback deal, I don't think it's holding them up from doing anything else that they'd want to do. They've already been so active that I think they're probably hitting the brakes anyway.
I would agree with you. And I'm sure Joe Shane and the front office, listen, they budgeted accordingly. They knew who they were going to target, and they said, okay, it's probably going to cost us in this ballpark. So what you do is you pencil in that area, and then you spend around that. I mean, that's what normally most front offices do. So I don't think, to your point, it is negatively impacting them pursuing other players at other positions. But I guess what I'm saying is, from a rationale standpoint, I don't think they're up against it where if they don't sign another quarterback, they're also hurting themselves, because I think all of these other quarterbacks are waiting for, once again, the first guy to sign.
Seems that way.
Once the first guy signs, then they determine, okay, I'm going to go to option A or I'm going to go to option B, and so forth. And here's the other thing. There have been a lot of quarterbacks that have been taken off the market. There's also a lot of teams, Paul, that are probably thinking, all right, we're going to address that position in the draft. So I think you have to look at it from a competition standpoint. How many teams are truly competing with the Giants for a potential starting veteran quarterback? Or even if you want to bring a backup into the situation. We know the Steelers, clearly have to determine what they want to do because Justin Fields is no longer on the team. Okay,
Right.
he's with the Jets, and Russell Wilson is one of these free agents. So you could throw them in there. The Vikings have J.J. McCarthy. Tomorrow they can go with him as their starter. I can understand they want to bring in a veteran. That's fine. But the Vikings are not in a precarious spot, I would argue, where they don't know what they want to do. They
Right.
drafted J.J. McCarthy last year for a reason. He was able to be a sponge with Sam Darnold last season, and assuming there are no setbacks, he could be their starter day one. Okay, so beyond Minnesota, beyond Pittsburgh, who are we talking about that is in serious contention for a starting veteran quarterback?
Well, you know what's interesting? You haven't heard anybody outside of Wilson attached to Cleveland. They made the deal for Pickett, of course.
Correct.
You haven't heard anybody.
And they have a high draft pick, by the way,
Yes.
too. So you can see them going in that
You
direction.
haven't heard anybody attached to the Vikings except for the occasional supposed bluff involving Rodgers.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether it's a bluff or not, but there have been reports at
Some
least
people
connected.
think that is totally false, and other people think there's smoke there. You haven't heard anybody connected to the Titans at all, and they're picking number one.
Which is why they don't have to show urgency, because they can get the quarterback they truly want if they choose to go in that direction.
So, other than that, well, the Raiders got their guy, the Jets got their guy, and
Yep.
those were two other teams that were really hurting for somebody.
And Atlanta's retaining Kirk Cousins for the time being, at least.
Seems like it.
So you could take them out of the mix because they have Michael Penix with a veteran backup. That's what I'm saying. I'm going through the other teams, and my point is, it still only circles back to 2-3 teams maybe. And here's the thing. The Giants have an opportunity to offer a player a starting job.
They do.
Okay, that's very different than
It's
Paul,
very different.
another team saying, we want you, but we're not guaranteeing you to start. We're looking at you more as the insurance policy. Or maybe you come in and you compete. Well, as it stands right now, Tommy DeVito's the only quarterback. So any of these veteran quarterbacks have to be saying to themselves, yeah, I mean, I feel good about my chances. Even if it goes down the road of a competition, I'm going to win that battle. So that's why another reason that I understand, I'm sure there's a lot of Giants fans that they're itchy. They want at least to solidify an answer of who the veteran's going to be in. But I think the more and more you look at the NFL landscape and you analyze it like we're doing, I would take a step back and breathe and look at the competition, what the Giants have to offer. And if it takes another week, if it takes 2 weeks, I don't think it's crazy based on, once again, what we're seeing across the NFL.
Yeah, it is what it is, and no matter what we think or what we say, it's not going to change anything.
No,
So
not at all.
we just sit back and watch the sands pour through the hourglass.
It's the waiting game. Yeah, and to your point, Tennessee, they've got Brandon Allen and Will Levis on the roster. Could they go after another veteran quarterback and draft a QB number one? I don't think that's crazy. I mean, that could happen. But these veteran quarterbacks are not naive. These veterans, they know Tennessee has the number one overall pick. They know the Giants have number 3. So Tennessee, if they go quarterback, Tennessee's going to get the guy they want. If the Giants want to go quarterback, assuming they don't move, there's no guarantee the Giants get the guy they want, which once again means if you want to be a starter, the chances of you signing with the team and holding on to the starting job, I would argue, is higher with New York than it is with Tennessee, and even if you want to throw Cleveland into the mix too. So that, once again, I think, I don't want to say that gives the Giants leverage. I think that would be the wrong term, but it maybe makes the Giants, not the team, the starting job more attractive because of the different options ahead of them in the draft and also what's going on across the table. All right, let's open up the phone lines as we move forward here on Big Blue Kickoff Live, Tuesday's edition, as we take you up till approximately 1:30 p.m. Eastern, focusing on the Giants' additions, the trends, what's going on with the quarterback market. We check in with Arnold in Buffalo with us here on BBKL. What's happening, Arnold? What do you got for us?
Good afternoon, fellas.
Good afternoon to you.
Hi.
Yeah, I want to tell you how happy I am to have found y'all's show. It's been great. I've been listening almost a year now.
Well,
And
thank
I
you.
really
Appreciate that.
think I got you down pat, Paulie. I love you too, man.
Well, I appreciate
But
that.
Lance, what would you do with, we need a quarterback. We need one. Would you trade next year's one?
For what? What are we trading next year's one for? To move up to Tennessee spot?
Yeah, to move up.
If they only love one quarterback, I would entertain that. But if
I mean you, not they.
Well, I mean, I don't think if you're asking me my personal opinion as opposed to what I think the team will do, I would not give up next year's number one. And the reason being is I think there are other voids on this roster. You have no idea how the team is going to perform this season. There's heavy competition within the division before we get looking outside the rest of the NFC. And I think that number one next year, regardless of where it falls, will be valuable to address some other part of the team. So I think if they are unsure of the quarterback, you can always go the route of a veteran and you could develop a guy simultaneously, but you should still have the opportunity with next year's first-round pick to be able to then bring in another young up-and-coming talent, which puts you in a more attractive, even better position. So if you're asking my personal opinion, I would not trade next year's number one.
But, okay, now think of it as they, meaning the Giants. They need to win. I mean, we need to win.
Well, the need to win, I mean, that's a very broad statement. Of course, I mean, they're anxious. They want to win, but you don't want to win and at the same time sacrifice future assets, investments, and seasons. And the best example I'll give you, Arnold, is if you go back to 2022. 2022, I think most would say went better than expected, record-wise, performance-wise. And then what happened in 2023 and then what followed here in 2024, it was not sustainable. Now, I'm not saying that they sacrificed assets in the draft, but the point is you can't focus on one season. The focus can't be all in on 2025. You have to think about what those decisions could do potentially to 2026, 27, and beyond. And if you're going to put yourself in a precarious spot and all you're doing is maybe staying competitive in 2025, I would argue that's not a risk worth taking.
He didn't want to hear that.
Well, I mean, listen, and Arnold, I'm telling you, you asked me for my opinion, I'm giving you that, and listen,
and but you know what? That sounds just like Paulie, and I thought maybe you might say yes.
Well, but see, you no, and listen, I understand that. We'll let you go on that note, Arnold, and I appreciate the phone call. I think you also need to take into consideration. And I've been on the record many times with Paul. I like Cam Ward. I think his experience is attractive. I think his arm strength is attractive. I like the fact that he didn't really have a great defensive support. He showed me a lot this past college football season. But is Cam Ward a guarantee? Meaning, is Cam Ward, if I put him in any circumstance, am I going to tell you that he's going to be a quarterback that's going to be a franchiser for the next 7-8 years? No, I can't guarantee you that. And I don't feel comfortable giving up a number one overall pick or a future first rounder, however you want to label it, to bank on that happening when, once again, the Giants are not necessarily just a quarterback away from everything coming to life. See, if they were just, you got to get the quarterback, and once you get the quarterback, Paul, everything else is going to be fine, then that's a different conversation maybe in terms of the level of risk that me personally, forget what the team is wanting to do, that I'd be willing to take. But they're not just a quarterback away. So I'm thinking of what a first-round pick next year could bring to the table, or what a first-round pick or a second-round pick the following year. You've got to weigh that against what you're trying to pull off on just an island within the context of this season.
No argument for me, especially when you consider that I've talked to some draft people who think there could be 5 first-round quarterbacks next year. It's projected to be a better class.
Well, I'm not even just thinking quarterbacks. I'm just thinking overall talent, too, is what I'm looking at.
Totally understood,
yeah.
But I'm throwing some more mustard onto that.
Sure.
By saying, look, if it doesn't work out this year and things just wind up going south again, and you've got to go for a quarterback in 2026, well, if you don't have that first-round pick, you might be missing out then on the top 5 quarterbacks in next year's class. Do you really want to do that?
I'll give you another great example to the caller's point, and it's a good question because it adds to the dialogue. The best example, recent history, that I think is related to what we're discussing is what the Niners did when they moved up to get Trey Lance, Paul. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now,
which, by the way, I was totally against. I thought it was a horrible decision because I did not like Trey Lance coming out, and I thought they made a terrible move. Turned out, didn't do much for him, did it?
Well, Trey Lance got hurt, and also Trey Lance, compared to Cam Ward's college starting experience, is night and day. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the biggest concern. That's why. Why do you think one of the first things I lead off with Cam Ward is multi-year starter? And I know you're big. This is the Bill Parcells school of thought, those principles, but there's validity to that too. So that's why I always lead off with that before I even get into the skill set. But I want to get back the Trey Lance point. If the Niners were a different organization, okay, and they didn't have a Jimmy Garoppolo or what turned out to be Brock Purdy. And remember, they didn't know that Brock Purdy was Brock Purdy at that point. So that's why I want to bring this example up. But if you put that situation in Cleveland or Tennessee or anywhere else, the Niners, okay, they survived that trade in giving up all those assets.
They did.
95% of the teams, Paul.
You pay for that.
Correct. They're still playing catch-up. Mm-hmm. They're not surviving that. So that's why I'm giving you that as an example. You've got to learn from even the rare circumstances where a team kept their head above water, but the only reason why they kept their head above water is they had a polished veteran, and they also had a 7th-round pick who added to an environment that was thriving. And they had the coaching staff and the personnel around the quarterback, all the weaponry for that to fall into place. That's not the Giants situation right now. So I don't want to hear anybody say, oh, well, the Niners did it with this. No. San Francisco is the outlier, okay? They are not what you should be bringing to the forefront. And that's what you have to see. See, I always bring up recent NFL history. We have a lot of conversations, Paul, because you're supposed to learn from other people's mistakes. Ideally, that's what you should be doing. Not enough teams do that. And I am a big proponent in fighting for teams across the league, not just the Giants on an island, to see what other teams didn't follow.
The league learned from that guaranteed contract to Deshaun Watson, though,
that they did. But once again, it took an enormous contract for us to get to there. But that's what more teams need to do. You have to say to yourself, okay, look at what the Niners did a few years ago. Why did it work? Why did they survive? And do we have the environment and the circumstances? So I like to look at that at least as perhaps something to add a little bit more to the conversation. Let's head back to the lines. We got Andrew in North Carolina with us here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. What's happening, Andrew? What do you got for us?
Hi, good afternoon, guys. Pearson, you're the greatest.
Well, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I've seen latest mock drafts. A lot of guys have us taking my number one guy. I'm all in on Shedeur Sanders once again. He was throwing the ball to Malik Neighbors in the streets. Him and Dave's have a little handshake going on. I'm reaching for that one. He has ultimate confidence, and he has a lot of personality, which we haven't really had at the quarterback position. No disrespect to Daniel Jones. And Eli had a lot of personality too, but just a certain demeanor and a certain attitude that I would really like. And I'm happy Kiper defended the Shedeur Sanders, because there's a lot of media saying he's a distraction and all of this. His dad never been a distraction in the locker room. So I appreciate Mel Kiper kind of sticking up for him. I was not a fan of the hat to the side during the combine. That probably doesn't mean a lot, and I know Baker.
I would say I don't think that means anything. You're really reading into things on that standpoint. If that's what you're nitpicking, Andrew, man, more power to you. I would not lose sleep over that.
But I'm all in on that, and I also called in earlier, and I'm big on Travis Hunter too. But I do have a few questions for you guys. Initially, the Titans put out the big statement, generational talent. Is that statement still being valid? Because they didn't make any moves, so it seems pretty obvious that quarterback is their guy. So does that hold any weight, that generational talent statement? And is there any chance that the Cleveland will get in the talks of moving away from 2? If they're not sold on Shedeur, which they might be, and Cam Ward is gone, is there any chance they would move with us? Because the Raiders, I believe, like Shedeur a lot, and I believe the Jets might consider it as well. Even though they have Geno Smith, I think they would still be interested in Shedeur. So is there any chance that the Browns would make that move? And the last one, I saw a small report of us making a trade for Kyler Murray. And Kyler Murray, I've also been told, is on the market. I don't know if that's true, but I have heard a little bit of Arizona shopping him. And I actually wouldn't mind that as well. He has to get off the Call of Duty a little bit, but I would like the Kyler Murray move, and that's all I have, guys.
All right, Andrew, appreciate the phone call. Okay, well, he threw out a lot there, so I don't know where you want to start. He asked about the Titans and their statement about that they wouldn't pass up on a generational talent with the number 1 overall pick, whether the Browns would move out of 2, and then the Kyler Murray. Well, let's start with the last one first.
Right.
I mean, at this point, it's conjecture.
There was a web rumor that the Cards were interested in moving Kyler Murray and that the Giants might be an interested taker. I have heard no legitimate crumbs about that story. It was simply a web rumor that I did see online and have not heard anything to back that up whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm with you. I haven't heard anything. At this point, I don't think it has any legs other than just speculation. And in the offseason, speculation runs wild. So I really would not read much into that. And also, if Arizona went out and made an aggressive move at quarterback, I would think maybe there's a little bit there. If they, hypothetically speaking, Paul, if they traded Kyler Murray away, who's their quarterback?
Well, they would have to, if they dealt Murray, you would think they would have to go into the top 3 to try to be in position to get one of those guys.
Well, meaning they'd get a pick in the Kyler Murray trade,
right.
And then anything's possible.
And I think that was probably the Webb proposal. And again, I really don't even want to talk about it because there's no substance that we know of. But I would assume that if they moved on from Murray, they would be attacking with vigor to get up to the top of the draft, which is the neighborhood the Giants are in, to get one of those guys.
Here's why I'm skeptical, and I'm with you. I mean, I also look at Jonathan Gannon, okay, who took over as the head coach in 2023. This is going to be his 3rd season. Don't you think there's urgency for him to win and get that team to the playoffs?
One would think so.
Right? So
there's not much patience in this league anymore.
Okay, so my point is, and the general manager who came in with Gannon. Mm-hmm. So they're year 3. Do they really want to bank on developing a rookie quarterback to get them to the promised land? I don't believe that. I don't buy that. So that's another layer to this as to why I'd be very surprised if they even entertain shipping.
There are those people, and I'm not one of them, who say, oh, you draft a rookie quarterback, you automatically get a mulligan and you get another free year as a coach and as a general manager.
I don't think that's proven in the NFL.
I don't believe that at all.
There's not enough tangible evidence.
There are those people who do believe that, though. And I don't know why.
I don't buy it.
Because I don't see enough evidence that indicates you get a free year. I don't see it at all. In fact, I just think it's a year of misery.
Well, hold on a minute. We have an example. We don't have to go outside of the bubble here. Pat Shurmur was here when Daniel Jones came in.
That's right.
What happened to Pat Shurmur?
That's right.
So tell that to Pat Shurmur. Shurmur would laugh you off the stage here, whatever we want to call it. Platform.
Not me, because I don't believe the fallacy.
I'm saying he would chuckle at that. I don't find any substance whatsoever behind that. All right, so let's get more to maybe a little bit reality.
All right, Titans and Browns
to the
you wanted to ask about.
Yes.
I don't think the Titans are moving out. I actually think they are going to take Cam Ward. And I think most people these days seem to believe that as well.
And I would not read into, see, the last caller loves to read into the web. You could tell based on all his questions. And when a team comes out with a statement, we're not going to pass on a generational talent. Of course, they're going to make a bold claim like that. That's like saying a team, after they draft a player, they're going to tell you, No, we had them the 85th player on our draft board. We were not entertaining that player at all. I mean, do you really think a team is going to acknowledge that? So that's why I wouldn't, once again, lose sleep over things that are more peripheral statements.
Well, that would be kind of like saying, of course, we would not pass on Superman if he was in the draft. Well, no kidding, because if you passed on Superman, you should be fired.
So that, to me, I think explains that. And then as far as would Cleveland entertain trading number 2, well, we talked about they brought in Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett, though, to me, is not a guaranteed long-term option for the Cleveland Browns. And we know the situation with with Deshaun Watson. Watson, it's the contract and it's the injury history. So is there room for them to bring in a rookie quarterback and develop him? Without a doubt. 100%. So what they've done, previous moves, I don't think should interrupt their aggressiveness in staying with number 2. I wouldn't eliminate that from the equation.
You know, sometimes the best thing you could do to help out your offense is to make a dominant defense. I would not be shocked if they took Carter and put him on the other side of Myles Garrett. Man, that would be really scary.
No, and it's a fair point. Here's my concern, though, and I'm going to bring back the angle I took with the Cardinals, with Monty Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon. Kevin Stefanski's been in Cleveland a lot longer. And there were people who were campaigning that maybe the Browns should have made a change this past season, which to me is crazy. He's a year removed from NFL Coach of the Year. What are we doing here? But, okay.
It's the NFL. That's why.
But don't you think Stefanski is saying to himself, after what he went through now for the last 2 seasons, right? It was a revolving door 2 years ago when Flacco came in. This year, Winston, Watson, I'm not even going to bore you with the details. How many other quarterbacks? Do you think he wants to go down that road again, Paul?
Does he get to make the pick?
Well, are we insinuating ownership is playing a prominent role in that?
Ownership could have a role
with
in
Jimmy
this.
Haslam, because Andrew Berry is the general manager, so we know the
And we are aware that Haslam is very involved.
Okay.
We also know that the GM doesn't necessarily have to be totally on board with the coach. He might be saying, hey, you know what? I just did what I did to lock up Myles Garrett. And that's going to be something we're going to be paying off now for a number of years. I'm really, really sold on Abdul Carter, which, by the way, is not a crime to be sold on Abdul Carter. Stefanski may not have a loud enough voice on that one.
Here's what I would say, though. Cleveland didn't have a terrible defense last season. And look at
I didn't say they did.
No. My point
is, you could be even that more dominant and potent if you added Carter.
But it still doesn't make up for the shortcoming under center. That's where I'm getting at. And I think Stefanski knows that from being an offensive-minded guy. He's going to say, you give us Abdul Carter, that's great. But if we can only score 10 points a game and our defense still gives up 13 or 15,
but Ward's going to go to Tennessee.
Well, but maybe, what I'm saying is, maybe they do like Sanders.
I would be really surprised. I don't know anybody that I have spoken to. And remember now, I spent a whole week in Indianapolis at the Combine.
It fluctuates.
I don't know anybody who believes that Shedeur Sanders should be the number 2 pick in this draft. It's hard to digest when somebody overdrafts a player that high.
Well, but quarterbacks, always overdrafted.
It happens.
They're the exception to the rule, I would argue, Paul.
It happens.
Because desperation changes the outlook.
I think the ownership and I think the GM, they're going to have cooler heads on this, and I think they take Abdul Carter. I really do.
Well, and I would not criticize them for going in the direction of Abdul Carter.
And I'm okay with that, by the way, because I'm taking Travis Hunter at number 3.
Well, as long as Cleveland cooperates for Paul Dottino, the world will fall into place. I'm glad we got closure on that front. But in all seriousness, remember, this is the same organization that drafted Johnny Manziel. I know he wasn't that high. My point is, Shedeur Sanders, the connection to Dion, the marketability. You see where I'm getting at? Sometimes teams think like that.
I'm pretty sure, now maybe I misread it. I'm pretty sure that there's been some negativity about the Cleveland market from the Sanders camp. Did I not recall seeing that?
I haven't seen anything specific. It's
that
possible.
His camp was saying that would really not be a good fit for him?
Remember, Dion came out, and this is something he said even when Shedeur was still at Colorado, that given his NFL ties, he could make it challenging for an NFL team to take his son because he understands the inner workings. And I'm paraphrasing. I mean, he insinuated that on a generic standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's what you're talking about as opposed to just Cleveland in particular. But if you heard something with Cleveland, maybe you did.
that somehow Cleveland was implicated in one of those conversations on one of the interviews that he did. And it wasn't just them in particular. It was a few teams, I think he had mentioned up at the top, that he was like, I don't think that'd be a good fit.
Sure.
He, of course, has been very positive in his comments about the Giants. So that's why a lot of people seem to think that the Giants and Sanders would be a good fit. But no, I seem to recall something of that nature. I wish maybe I can look for it while you take the next call.
Yeah, let's speak of that. Let's head back to the phone lines, and William is in Minnesota with us here on BBKO. What's happening, William?
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure, what's on your mind?
I've just been, obviously the Giants have not been very good the past couple of years, and ever since Coughlin got fired, everything has kind of been downhill besides the 1 year when we beat the Vikings in the playoffs. And I saw that we were talking to, Joe Flacco and Jameis Winston, who I don't really feel like is probably going to happen. And I was at that Colts game in December when we beat them, and Flacco, he played not very great in that game. And at the time, since I was there, I really wanted us to win, but looking back, maybe it would have been better if we didn't. But I was kind of wondering what you guys thought about, the draft. Obviously, that's one of the big topics, and I feel like there hasn't been a ton of rumors or anything about necessarily who the Browns want to take, so I'm not a huge Shedeur Sanders fan, but at the end of the day, he's probably the second best quarterback in the draft, and obviously that's the thing we need. And I don't know if Jalen Milroe or Jackson Dart you guys think would be available in the beginning of the second round.
I think it's possible. It's possible that one of those two guys could be there in the second round. I don't think that's a stretch. I mean, remember, all it takes is one team to be enamored with a quarterback, and they're willing to maybe utilize a first-round pick. But I don't think it's a stretch for Milroe or Dart, at least one of them, to be there in the high part or portion of the second round, to answer your question.
Yeah, and I also was wondering what you guys thought about Russell Wilson, because I kind of feel like the Giants should just stop waiting on Rodgers, and since Wilson said something like, I'm ready to sign when the Giants come calling, I feel like we should just sign him and then draft a rookie somewhere in the, and maybe if Wilson's only around for 1 year, but that's 1 year for a rookie to learn from a very experienced vet who's been coached by three, obviously, really good coaches.
Well, I think that's a fair point. We'll let you go on that note. I mean, you could argue, though, to your point, that if they brought in Aaron Rodgers, you're getting the same thing. If you're wanting a veteran presence in the quarterback room, is there that dramatic of a difference between Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers? That young quarterback would still be learning from a polished veteran who has performed consistently on a high level and has helped his teams win a lot of games. So I don't know if there is a huge differential in terms of them maybe, hypothetically speaking, they want to wait for Rodgers and see what happens there, and if not, turn to Wilson or another option. I mean, once again, I go back to what I said at the beginning of the show. I don't think they're hurting themselves. I mean, the caller's point, Paul, was the fact that they shouldn't wait. Russell Wilson's out there. They should sign him and not worry about what the other quarterbacks are doing. But
what does Russell Wilson want to do?
Well, that's the other thing. It takes two to tango. I agree with you.
Yeah. I did find the item here. According to Deion Sanders' friend Shannon Sharp, he says the older Sanders is not going to allow Shedeur to come to Cleveland, and it was his opinion based on his conversations with Deion.
Okay, so
there was
somebody
something
else,
there.
not Deion. That
right, there was
said
something
that. Okay.
there, but then subsequent to that, Deion has said he just thinks his son's going to go in the top 3 or 4, and Shedeur Sanders has reportedly visited with the Browns. And so, again, part of the problem is at this time of year, you don't know what you hear or what you should believe. But there was something out there at least that was of the negative variety. So I wasn't imagining it.
No, and I wasn't accusing you of imagining
but
it.
I also don't want to necessarily put a tremendous amount of weight on that either. Let's just throw it all out there as something that's got to be taken with a grain of salt. I still think the Browns probably will take Carter. If I had to do a mock draft, which I will not do because I can't stand them.
Well, we really could use your mock draft because there's not enough
You
out
don't
there
do
right
one
now.
either.
My own personal mock draft? No. I've
because-
never found much
Exactly.
value in mock drafts
I
in general.
couldn't agree with you more.
Because what do I always say this? I've brought this up in the past. Nobody ever takes the time a week or two later to go back and analyze all of the mock drafts to see how accurate they are to determine whether or not the following year they want to put a lot of weight behind it.
Actually, there is a particular service that does do that.
Do they? But do they
Yeah.
actually? I
and
never
usually
seen
what
it.
and usually what they find is I've seen it because they do a scoreboard.
Okay.
And
I don't think it's promoted much.
the
maybe.
best ones are usually about 83-85% accurate.
Okay, so there's
In
still
terms of getting
15%
in
is
terms
up.
of getting
Yeah.
first round guys.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean they were direct hits to the team.
Just meaning players that were selected in the
Right.
first round, but that's very different.
Usually that's about the highest you're going to get is about 85%.
But that's a lot of leeway
I know
that they're throwing out
That's
there. To just say if guys go in the
That's
first
why
round.
I don't stay up till
Yeah.
4 o'clock in the morning worried about, the next mock draft 5.37 is coming out in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hit Twitter and find it.
Well, by the time 5.37 comes out, 5.38 is already being published, and 5.39 is being edited, okay? So you drive yourself nuts based on those developments. And I'm with you, not to say that Shannon Sharp doesn't have a good relationship with Deion Sanders, but whenever there's a conduit speaking on behalf,
You never know.
You never know how
never
they
know.
interpret things. So,
Anyway.
yeah. And I also, I look at it with respect to Cleveland and Tennessee, the head coaching situations, the general manager situations, what's currently on the roster. And there's a lot of smoke signals, Paul, that are sent out during this
No
time of the year,
doubt.
too. You got to take that into consideration.
I've told people many times on this program, I was taught very early in my career, this is the one time of the year where no matter how well you know somebody in an organization, and no matter how good of friends you think you are with someone in an organization, they would even lie to their own mother when it comes to free agency and the draft at this time of year. And they can be excused for that because this is that critical a time.
Because teams are in the business, and nor should they look to prioritize telling the whole world what they're going to do. They should be doing the complete opposite. So that's more of a reason why when we had a caller earlier quoting statements from the team or this and that, that's more of a reason why you should be a bit skeptical, because they're actually in the business of trying to redirect teams
No doubt.
from what they're doing and what they're thinking.
And oh, by the way, there are many of general managers in this league who have admitted,
Oh, yeah.
this isn't a fallacy, have admitted that they'll ask somebody in the office, peruse so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so, their mock drafts, their rumor mill. I think there might be something there. I do want you to keep track on some of the stuff that's coming out with some of the people. That does happen. This is not like a figment of the imagination. And that's because they feel like they need to stay abreast of what's out there from the most responsible people. Now, it doesn't mean that they're taking it at face value. They're smart enough to know to take it with a wheelbarrow of salt. They do understand that too. But there are some teams that will make sure they pay attention.
The other element in play here is the agents. Let's not forget about that.
No doubt about that.
There is an incentive for stories to be released about their clients and saying there's a lot of buzz surrounding the player. Because what do you want to do? You want to give teams a reason to second guess whether or not a player is going to fall to them at a certain pick. So you have both of these forces going. You have teams trying to misdirect. You have agents trying to sell hard their clients. And those forces are not necessarily in line with one another. More of a reason why you have to be cautious when you consume reports from all walks of life around this time of the year. That's why I don't go overly crazy You got to stick to, I think, what's on the rosters, maybe the track record of teams, and also what perhaps would make the most sense, at least on the surface, for them.
In short, that's why I love that caller before when he said, hey, Paul, I know what you would do. Lance, what would you do? And then when you answered him and he didn't like your answer, then he said, okay, what do you think the Giants will do? Yeah. Well, I think you're more of my side of the conversation, where I'll tell you what I would do based on my opinion, based on what I've seen or what I know. I'm not into the crystal ball business here, okay? Because the crystal ball business is full of clouds, all right? The crystal ball is very, very cloudy. There's no glass cleaner that's going to make the crystal ball clean. It doesn't work that way, not at this time of the year. So rather than tell you what I think the Giants will do, I will tell you based on what I know, what I feel, what I understand to be, how I would do it if I was in their chair. That's always the way that I've approached it. And when people don't like it, they don't have to like it. It's an opinion. That's all. I'm not predicting. Predicting is foolish. It doesn't make any sense. Come on. None of us know 1/2000th of what's in those personnel folders upstairs, of what the scouts have spent how many years on looking at a particular prospect. Come on. It's presumptuous to think that we would actually be in that spot.
Well, there's also, which is what I think what you were alluding to, there are items there that have nothing to do with football, X's and O's, and that could force a team to go in a completely different direction. And nobody's necessarily entertaining that.
As we found out during the combine, Carter's got this stress spot in his foot. I have no idea what each NFL team's medical staff thinks about Carter's foot.
Yeah.
Zero. None. I'll simply tell you, I'm going on the assumption that, okay, if his foot's fine and the Cleveland Browns doctors have cleared him, I could see a very logical path that says they should take Abdul Carter. That's all.
I have to commend you when you were giving that whole crystal ball breakdown. You did not specify a specific glass cleaner. You left it open-ended. See, you're learning. We don't want to give credit to any sponsor. So I love how you left it very generic, to each their own, in terms of glass cleaning methodology.
Yes.
So, yeah, I got to commend you. That was just tip-top analysis, Paul. That didn't go over my head. I wanted you to know that I was listening very astutely.
You could use ammonia, just pure ammonia, and that's not a brand either.
Maybe I'm asking for trouble here as you now start naming. We were so good.
No, ammonia's not a brand name.
I know. That's a specific thing.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Fair enough. Just didn't want to lose sight of that.
We try to be entertaining on this program. Yes. Even when you guys don't agree with our opinions, we try to have some fun.
Try is the key operating phrase we should mention.
Absolutely.
Yes, 100%. All right, well, good conversation as always.
Yes, sir.
And we will look to continue to do it moving forward, as something tells me this is not the end of the quarterback carousel, and it's not the end in terms of draft analysis. But a reminder that Big Blue Kickoff Live, you can catch on the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcast. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest, and we'll speak to you on Wednesday's edition of BBKL. Have a good one.